Tell it as it happened, in the order my hands recorded it, because the record is all I have left. Parts of it are blurred now, whole sequences reduced to impressions, to heat without source and sound without origin. That was done to me deliberately, and I will explain how when I reach it. But the beginning remains intact. They did not take the beginning. Perhaps they believed it was harmless on its own. They were wrong. My name, for the purpose of this account, does not matter. I was a lex mechanic of the Administratum, serial designation Rho 7 Tertius, attached to the 4th Expeditionary Catalogue Division under the operational umbrella of Ordo Xenos Detachment Sigma Fel. My function was documentation. My tools were a transcription stylus, a data slate of sanctified manufacture, and the linguistic subroutines implanted during my 3rd year of Skolem training. I did not carry a weapon. I did not require one. My war was fought in notation, in the precise arrangement of observed phenomena into categories that the Imperium could absorb, redact, or destroy as doctrine required. I had served in this capacity for 11 years without incident. 11 years of dead worlds, of alien rubble, of broken architectures that smelled of calcium and rot. 11 years of confirming what the Catechism taught, that Xenos species rise, corrupt, and are extinguished by the weight of their own inadequacy, and that the Imperium of Man inherits their ruins as proof of divine mandate. The mining world was designated KV Theta 09. It had been reclaimed during the 13th year of the Dravan Sector Purification Campaign, a broad-spectrum operation to cleanse frontier systems of Orc remnants and unclassified xeno-contamination. KV Theta 09 was stripped of value in the Dark Age, recolonized twice, abandoned twice, and finally reclaimed for tithe purposes by a mid-range Administratum charter that no one in command bothered to read. The subsurface anomalies were detected during tertiary geological survey. Magnetic densities inconsistent with natural mineral deposits. Structural echoes suggesting vaulted chambers at a depth of 900 meters. The preliminary report classified them as collapsed infrastructure from prior human habitation. That classification held for 3 months before the Mechanicus contradicted it. Magos Verilin Dreth, the senior tech priest assigned to the excavation, determined that the subsurface construction predated all known human activity on KV Theta 09 by an order of magnitude that made his subordinates recalculate twice and then fall silent. The Ordo Xenos was notified. An excavation detachment was authorized. I was attached because dead Xenos architectures required documentation before demolition, and documentation required someone trained to write without interpretation. That was my function. Write what you see, not what it means. I was good at that. I had trained the instinct out of myself years ago, the dangerous habit of asking why a thing existed, when all that mattered was that it existed and could be categorized. The Imperium does not need its clerks to understand. It needs them to record, so that those above them in the hierarchy can decide what is understood and what is suppressed. I performed this role faithfully, until the vault opened from within. The descent shaft had been cut by Mechanicus boring servitors over 6 days, a vertical passage reinforced with plasteel struts and lined with devotional markers at every 50-meter interval. The air grew warmer as we descended, which was unusual. Dead structures cool. They equalize with the surrounding geology over centuries. The temperature gradient should have declined. Instead, it rose, degree by degree, as if we were approaching something that still generated output. Magos Dreth noted the anomaly but did not comment on it publicly. I saw him adjust his internal thermal regulators, the subtle whir of a chest-mounted cooling unit cycling higher. His acolytes followed suit. The guardsmen of the escort platoon simply sweated, their flak armor darkening at the collar and joints. At 940 meters, we reached the outer seal. It was not a door in any human architectural sense. It was a membrane of layered metal, dark and faintly luminous, set into the surrounding rock as though the stone had been shaped around it rather than excavated to reveal it. There was no frame, no hinge, no mechanism visible on the exterior surface. It simply was, a boundary that predated the rock encasing it. Magos Dreth ordered the liturgical awakening protocol. This was standard procedure for sealed xeno-constructs of unknown provenance. You do not breach with force, because force can trigger countermeasures. You attempt resonance. You project frequencies, both mechanical and binharic, across the surface and observe for harmonic response. If the structure reacts, you have a negotiation. If it does not, you drill. The acolytes arranged themselves in a semicircle before the seal. Incense burners were lit, filling the descent chamber with sanctified vapors that smelled of burning circuitry and myrrh. 3 junior tech priests intoned a binharic sequence that I could not fully hear, only feel. The sub-audible frequencies vibrated in my teeth, in the fluid behind my eyes. I stood at the rear of the formation, stylus active, recording the emanation patterns as ordered. The frequencies shifted. The seal responded. It did not open like a door. It dilated, like the iris of an eye widening to admit light. The layered metal petals folded inward with a precision that suggested lubrication, maintenance, active upkeep. But there was nothing visible to perform such upkeep. No servitor tracks, no maintenance alcoves, no sign of any custodial presence. Air moved outward from the opened seal, and it carried no scent of age, no must, no mineral taint, no organic residue. The air that came from inside the vault was clean, perfectly, impossibly clean, as if it had been filtered moments before our arrival. I recorded this. My stylus moved without hesitation, though my hand had begun to tremble, a small vibration I attributed to the sub-audible frequencies still cycling through the rock. Beyond the iris, the vault extended into darkness that was not darkness. There was illumination, faint, sourceless, green, not the green of vegetation or biologics, but a mineral green, the color of corroded copper energized by current. It came from everywhere and nowhere, as though the walls themselves were conducting light at a frequency just barely within human perception. Magos Dreth stepped through first. His mechadendrites fanned outward, sampling atmosphere, measuring radiation, recording geometry. His optical array pulsed red as it scanned the space beyond. Then he stopped. I could not see past his bulk initially. The tech priest was heavily augmented, his frame widened by shoulder-mounted sensor clusters and a dorsal power unit that hummed like a restrained turbine. But when I stepped to his left and looked into the vault, I understood his stillness. Sarcophagi, ranks of them, extending into the green-lit distance until perspective reduced them to points. They were arranged in rows of absolute geometric precision, each one identical, each one separated from its neighbor by exactly the same interval. The symmetry was not approximate. It was perfect. The kind of perfection that organic construction cannot achieve, that even imperial manufacture struggles to replicate. They were metallic, dark, the same layered material as the seal, but each one bore markings, glyphs etched into the surface in patterns that suggested language or rank or both. Each sarcophagus was roughly humanoid in proportion, but too narrow, too angular, proportioned for a body that had been redesigned rather than born. There were thousands in this chamber alone. I began counting. The litany of enumeration steadied me, each number a small act of order imposed on the incomprehensible. I reached 312 before Magos Dreth interrupted with a binharic command to record physical specifications rather than quantity. I obeyed. The air inside the vault was warm. Not hot, but warm. The warmth of a system in minimal operational status. The sarcophagi hummed, individually almost inaudible, but collectively the sound filled the space like a sustained organ note pitched below comfortable hearing. I felt it in my sternum, in the soles of my feet, through my boots. The guardsmen spread into a defensive perimeter at the chamber's entrance. Sergeant Volkan, a heavy-set Katachan veteran whose face was more scar tissue than skin, positioned his squad with their backs to the walls and their lasguns tracking the rows of silent metal coffins. He did not speak, but his jaw worked in small, rhythmic motions, the grinding of a man who had learned to process fear through his teeth. I remember thinking, this is a mausoleum, a grand one, built by a species with extraordinary technical capacity, but a mausoleum nonetheless. The dead do not require maintenance. That thought comforted me for exactly as long as it took to write, because as I recorded the ambient temperature, the harmonic frequency, the dimensional specifications of the nearest sarcophagus, I heard a sound that did not belong in a mausoleum. A click, mechanical, deliberate, originating from inside the sarcophagus 3 meters to my right, not the click of settling metal or thermal expansion, a latch releasing, a mechanism engaging after dormancy. I looked at Magos Dreth. He was already turning, his optical array shifting spectrum, his mechadendrites retracting into defensive configuration. His voice, filtered through his vocabulator, carried no inflection, but the speed of his command betrayed urgency. Continue recording. The lid of the sarcophagus did not open. It separated, each panel retracting into the body of the container with the same iris motion as the vault seal. The green light inside was brighter, concentrated, pulsing with a rhythm that I could not help but recognize as cardiac, not a heartbeat, the memory of one. Something rose from within. It was skeletal, but not in the way of remains. It was skeletal by design, a frame of articulated metal shaped to approximate a humanoid body stripped of all organic excess. No flesh, no covering, no pretense of life, only function, encoded in limbs that moved with frictionless precision and a cranial structure that housed 2 apertures where eyes might once have been. The apertures ignited. Green. The same green as the vault light, but focused, directional, possessed of a quality I can only describe as attentive. The light swept the chamber not randomly but systematically, cataloging the space the way I had been cataloging it moments before. It found Magos Dreth, it found the guardsman, it found me. It paused on me for a duration I cannot accurately report. It may have been a second, it may have been 5. In that interval, I felt something I had never experienced in 11 years of documenting the dead remnants of alien civilizations. I felt assessed, not threatened, not targeted. Assessed the way a landowner surveys tenants occupying a property in his absence. The gaze carried no hostility, but neither did it carry recognition of legitimacy. We were present. We were noted. We were not relevant. Sergeant Volkan fired first. The last bolt struck the construct's thorax and dissipated, not deflected, not absorbed in the way void shields consume energy. It simply ceased to matter, the energy dispersing across the metallic surface as though the material itself rejected the concept of damage. 3 more guardsmen fired. Solid rounds, las fire, a single crack grenade that detonated against the construct's left shoulder and accomplished nothing except to fill the chamber with smoke and noise. The construct turned toward Volkan. It did not rush. It did not lunge. It walked, each step measured, each joint articulating with mechanical perfection. The sergeant kept firing. His squad kept firing. The construct reached him during his 4th trigger pull and extended one articulated hand. What followed was not violence in any sense I understood. Violence implies emotion, intention, excess. The construct disassembled Volkan with the efficiency of a tech adept stripping a malfunctioning component. One arm separated at the shoulder with a lateral motion that cut through flak armor, muscle, and bone without slowing. The other arm severed at the elbow. The sergeant did not scream for as long as I expected, but the sounds he made were worse for their brevity. The construct released the remains and turned back toward the chamber, its attention already elsewhere. I was still recording. My stylus had not stopped moving. The liturgical discipline of transcription held me in place when every nerve demanded flight, and I wrote what I saw in the formal notation of observational protocol because the alternative was to acknowledge that what I had witnessed was not an anomaly. It was a correction. The being had not attacked. It had removed an obstruction, the way one might brush aside an insect that had landed on a workbench. And then it had resumed whatever process our intrusion had interrupted. Other sarcophagi were clicking. The sound propagated down the rows like a wave, each latch engaging in sequence, each lid beginning its iris dilation. 1, 5, 20. The count exceeded my ability to track within seconds. Margos Dreth issued the withdrawal order. His voice remained flat, but his locomotion units moved him toward the vault entrance at a speed I had never seen from him, the heavy tread of his augmented legs cracking the stone floor with each step. I ran. I am not ashamed of this. The guardsmen ran. 2 of them carried Vulcan's remains, though there was no reason to, because what remained of Sergeant Vulcan would not benefit from extraction. Behind us, the vault filled with the sound of awakening, not a roar, not a battle cry, a hum, rising in harmonic layers as hundreds, perhaps thousands, of mechanisms resumed operation after a dormancy I could not yet comprehend. The ritual had not summoned them. The resonance protocol had not activated them. We had merely been present when the cycle dictated their emergence. They had been waiting. The vault sealed behind us, the iris contracting of its own volition, and even that felt like a statement. The door was not closing against us. It was closing because we were no longer of interest. We ascended in silence. I wrote continuously, my stylus scratching against the data slate with a frenzy that left my wrist aching by the time we reached the surface. Behind me, 2 junior tech priests murmured Binharic prayers in a register I had never heard from the Mechanicus before. It sounded, if such a word could apply to their filtered voices, desperate. On the surface, the mining world's sky was the color of ash. The light of its distant sun fell weak and gray across prefabricated structures and excavation machinery. Everything looked temporary. Everything looked thin. I did not know yet what I had seen. I classified it as a tactical incident, a reanimation event, a defensive response by a dormant construct. These categories were available. They were sanctioned. They allowed the event to be filed without consequence. But my hand would not stop shaking. It did not stop for 3 days. I want to explain what I believed before the vault, because belief is the architecture upon which the Imperium constructs its servants. And to understand how mine collapsed, you must first see how it was built. I was educated in the Shalom Progenium on Velthus II, a mid-hive world whose primary contribution to the Imperium was administrative personnel. The Skolum was efficient but not cruel, or rather, its cruelties were so normalized as to be invisible. We were taught the catechism of imperial primacy beginning at age 4. By age 10, I could recite the 7 proofs of human supremacy without error, each one a logical construction that began with the axiom of the Emperor's divinity and ended with the inevitable conclusion that humanity was the galaxy's rightful inheritor. The Xenos, we were told, were aberrations. Temporary blights on a cosmos designed for human occupation. They arose through accident or malice, corrupted what they touched, and fell, as all things fell that were not sustained by the Emperor's light. This was not opinion. It was structural truth, embedded in every text, every catechism, every historical account available to a Skolum student of the Administratum track. The great alien empires of antiquity were presented as object lessons. The Aeldari, fallen through decadence. The Orcs, persistent but purposeless. The Tau, ambitious but infantile. Each one a variation of the same lesson. They failed where humanity endures because humanity is chosen. I believed this completely. Not with passion, not with fervor, but with the absolute certainty of someone for whom the alternative has never been presented. Water flows downward. Stars burn. Xenos empires fall. My assignment to the Ordo Xenos excavation detachments did not challenge this belief. It reinforced it. For 11 years, I documented the remains of alien civilizations, and every ruin confirmed the catechism. Broken walls, corroded metals, degraded biologics. Entropy devoured everything that was not sustained by the Emperor's will. The tomb complexes I had catalogued before KV Theta 09 were all consistent with this truth. Ancient, impressive, dead. The skill that built them was undeniable, but skill without divine mandate was merely ornamentation on the inevitable. Humanity inherits all it conquers. This is not boast. It is physics. The mining world should have been another confirmation. In the first days after the Vault Awakening, while the Ordo Xenos detachment established a cordon and the Mechanicus deployed additional sensor arrays, I continued my documentation duties in the upper excavation levels. These levels contained structures that were clearly ancillary to the deeper vault. Corridors of the same dark metal, chambers containing instrumentation I could not identify, and everywhere, the geometric perfection that marked the builders as obsessively precise. I catalogued these structures with professional thoroughness. Each chamber received a designation. Each artifact received a classification number. Each anomaly was noted, annotated, and submitted to Magos Dreth's oversight staff for theological assessment. It was during this cataloguing that I encountered the star map. The chamber was circular, approximately 30 meters in diameter, with a vaulted ceiling that rose to a point somewhere above the range of my lumen. The walls were covered in relief, raised metallic lines forming patterns that I initially classified as decorative. But when I activated my transcription array and began mapping the relief against known geometric references, the patterns resolved into stellar cartography. A star map, not schematic, not approximate. Precise, individual stars represented by raised nodes connected by lines that suggested navigational routes or territorial boundaries. The center of the map was not Terra. I noted this with clinical detachment. Xenos species routinely centered their cosmologies on their homeworlds or capital systems. This was expected, even banal. But as I continued mapping, cross-referencing the node positions against the navigational charts loaded in my data slate, I found that none of the constellations matched, not because they were fictional, because they were displaced. The stars were real, but their positions were wrong, shifted from their current locations by margins that increased consistently across the map. The pattern was uniform. Every star had moved by the same proportional degree. Stellar drift. I had rudimentary astrophysical training as part of my navigational certification. Stars move. Their positions shift over time, gradually, incrementally, across spans that are measured not in centuries but in geological epochs. The displacement on this map was consistent with a single, coherent observation made at a point so far in the past that the stars had since migrated to entirely different apparent positions. I calculated roughly, using the standard drift coefficients from my training. The margin of error was enormous, but even the most conservative estimate placed the map's creation at several million years before the present. My stylus stopped. I stood in that circular chamber, surrounded by the patient green glow of alien architecture, and I confronted a number so large that it made my throat constrict. Several million years. The earliest confirmed records of human civilization, even accounting for the Dark Age, reached back perhaps 30 or 40,000 years. The Imperium itself was 10,000 years old. This map was older than anything I had a category for. I wrote the number on my data slate. Then I deleted it. Then I wrote it again, smaller, in the margin of a secondary notation field, where it would not appear in the primary transcript. Then I did something I had never done in 11 years of service. I annotated the star map as ceremonial ornamentation, symbolic rather than navigational, consistent with xeno-religious cosmology. I lied because the alternative was to record a fact that doctrine could not contain. If the map was accurate, then the builders of this complex had been a spacefaring civilization millions of years before humanity existed. If they had been spacefaring that long ago, then the Catechism's foundational claim that humanity was the galaxy's natural inheritor was not merely incomplete, it was a convenience. I sealed the notation and moved to the next chamber. My hands were steady. The lie was small, clerical, easily justified. The Imperium is sustained by such small lies, each one a brick in the wall that separates what is known from what is permitted to be known. I did not yet understand that I was participating in a tradition far older than my own career. The Ordo Xenos Inquisitor arrived on the 4th day. Her name was Castira Velt, and she descended into the excavation site with the quiet authority of someone who has been trained to own every room she enters. She was not physically imposing, a slight woman of indeterminate age, her face lined by years of service but not softened by them. She wore the rosette of the Ordo Xenos openly, a statement that required no elaboration. Her retinue consisted of 2 armed acolytes, a savant with a cranial implant array that covered most of his skull, and a lex mechanic of higher designation than myself, whose function I was never told. Inquisitor Velt assumed operational control within an hour of her arrival. Orders were transmitted through the chain of command with the efficiency of a reflex. All surface-to-orbit communication was restricted to encrypted channels. All personnel who had entered the vault were confined to the excavation site. All data slates used in the lower levels were to be surrendered at end of shift for review and sanctification. I surrendered mine without hesitation. Compliance was reflex. An inquisitor's authority was absolute, and questioning that authority was a conceptual pathway to outcomes I did not wish to contemplate. Velt summoned me on her 2nd day. The interview took place in a prefabricated structure that had been converted into a command post, the walls lined with data screens, displaying geological surveys and energy readouts. She sat behind a field desk that was empty, except for a single data slate, which I recognized as a copy of my transcription logs. She read my annotations aloud. Vault dimensions, sarcophagi count, atmospheric composition, reanimation event, casualty report, all accurate, all compliant. Then she reached the star map. Ceremonial ornamentation, she read. Her voice was flat, neither approving nor accusing. Symbolic rather than navigational. I confirmed the classification. She looked at me for a long moment. Her eyes were grey, the color of the ash sky outside, and they carried the same quality I had seen in the reanimated construct's gaze. Assessment without sentiment. "You will continue your transcription duties," she said. "You will record physical observations, dimensional data, material composition, emanation readings. You will not record interpretive analysis. You will not speculate on the age, origin, or purpose of anything you observe. If a datum requires contextual framing, you will flag it for Magos Dreth's evaluation and leave the corresponding field blank." I confirmed. She placed a document before me, a non-dissemination oath sealed with the inquisitorial cipher and annotated with penalty clauses that referenced sanction protocols I had never encountered. The consequences for breach were not execution, which would at least carry a certain clarity, but incremental. Demotion, isolation, memory interdiction, and ultimately the kind of administrative erasure that leaves a person alive but removes them from every record that might confirm they had ever existed. I signed. My survival, which had previously been guaranteed by competence, was now conditional upon compliance. The distinction seemed minor at the time. Compliance was what I did. It was what I had always done. Inquisitor Velt dismissed me with a nod, and I returned to the excavation levels with my cleared data slate and my restricted mandate, feeling, if I am honest, relieved. Someone above me understood what was happening here. Someone with authority was managing the situation. My role was to observe and record within sanctioned parameters, and that role was safe. Safety, I would learn, was another convenience. The sixth day brought me deeper into the complex than I had previously been permitted. Magos Dreth's mapping servitors had charted additional chambers below the primary sarcophagi vault, and the Mechanicus had established a secondary research perimeter in what they designated sub-level Auric. I was escorted by a squad of guardsmen from the 47th Prosan Fusiliers, replacing Volcan's unit, which had been pulled from rotation after the Vault incident. The new squad's sergeant, a woman named Kel Oreth, whose left eye had been replaced by a crude augmetic that glowed a dull amber, positioned her soldiers with the precise paranoia of someone who had been briefed on exactly what had happened to her predecessor. Sub-level Auric was different from the upper chambers. The sarcophagi vault had been impressive in its scale, but it was, fundamentally, storage. The architecture served a single function: containment of dormant constructs. Sub-level Auric served a different purpose, one that I recognized with a chill that started at the base of my skull and did not relent for hours. It was a record hall. The chamber was vast, perhaps 100 meters in its longest dimension, and every surface was covered, not with glyphs, not with ornamentation, with data, encoded in crystalline structures embedded in the walls, the floor, the distant ceiling. The crystals were arranged in clusters, each cluster connected to its neighbors by metallic conduits that pulsed faintly with the same green luminescence that characterized the entire complex. At the chamber's center stood obelisks, 6 of them, arranged in a hexagonal pattern around a raised platform. Each obelisk was perhaps 4 meters tall, faceted like a gemstone, and when I approached the nearest one, I could see that its surface was not static. Patterns moved within the crystal, shifting, cycling, repeating, data in motion. Magos Dreth was already present, connected to the nearest obelisk by a cluster of interface cables that ran from his cranial ports to receptor nodes on the crystal's surface. His acolytes monitored his vitals on portable displays. His body was motionless, but his optical array flickered rapidly, processing input at a rate I could not comprehend. I was ordered to prepare for interface. The instruction came not from Dreth, who was deep in his communion, but from one of his senior acolytes, a tech priest designated Calculus Adept Yeris, whose face was entirely replaced by a smooth chrome faceplate with a single central lens. I protested. My augmentations were minimal, a basic data port at the base of my skull for high-speed transcription input, standard administratum issue. I was not equipped for deep data interface with alien technology. The risk of cognitive contamination was substantial. Yeris informed me that Magos Dreth required a secondary interpreter, one trained in linguistic and conceptual analysis rather than pure technical decryption. The obelisks did not contain language in any recognized sense. They contained something closer to experiential records, memory patterns encoded in crystalline matrices. Alex Mechanic's training in data interpretation made me the most suitable available asset. I was not asked. I was assigned. The interface cable connected to my data port with a click that felt surgical, a small violation that my body recognized before my mind did. There was a moment of warmth at the connection point, then a spreading sensation that moved through my skull like liquid metal finding its level. Then the memories began. I need to be precise about what I experienced, because precision is the only weapon I have left against the blur that was later imposed on these moments. The obelisk did not project images into my mind the way a PIC display projects onto a screen. It shared perception, the perceptive experience of beings who had recorded their existence in these crystals millions of years before I was born. I felt a sun, not our sun. A sun that was dying, its light reddened by age, its warmth insufficient to sustain the world it had once nurtured. I felt the slow withdrawal of that warmth as a physical ache, not in the bones but in the cells themselves, as if entropy were a texture that could be felt against the skin. I was small, frail. My body, the body I inhabited in this memory, was organic but degraded, its limbs thin, its respiration labored, its sensory apparatus strained to interpret a world that was dimming around it. I was dying, not suddenly, slowly, the way all mortal things die, one system at a time, one capacity at a time, the universe withdrawing its investment, and I was angry. The anger was not human anger, not the hot flash of injustice or the cold burn of resentment. It was something older, deeper, more architectural. It was the fury of a consciousness that understood its own mortality as a design flaw, not a natural condition. I, this ancient being whose perceptions I wore like borrowed skin, did not accept death as inevitable. I perceived it as a problem to be solved. There were others, billions of others. A species stretched across stars, each one dying the same slow death, each one aware that their sun-born curse, the radiation that accelerated their decay, could not be cured by any technology they possessed. I felt their desperation as a pressure in my chest, a weight that transcended the merely physical. They had achieved interstellar travel. They had built empires. They had waged wars against species whose names I did not recognize and won. And none of it mattered, because their bodies were failing, generation by generation, each cohort weaker than the last, each child born closer to the extinction that their intellect could predict but not prevent. Then I felt the offer. It came from entities I could not perceive directly, only in fragments, impressions of beings composed of energy so fundamental that they predated matter itself, starborn. Stellar entities of living fire whose existence operated on scales that made the dying species millions of years seem brief. They offered a bargain: immortality in exchange for service. The memory fractured here became kaleidoscopic, a cascade of perspectives overlapping. I felt the debate, the factions, the leaders who counseled acceptance, and the dissenters who warned of consequences. I felt the weight of a species-wide decision being made not in a single moment, but across decades of deliberation that compressed, in memory, to a single agonized pulse of surrender. They accepted. What followed was the biotransference. I have tried to describe this to myself, in the privacy of my own thoughts, in the years since, and I have failed every time. The obelisk did not spare me. It shared the experience with the same fidelity it shared everything else, and what I perceived was not a procedure. It was an extinction event experienced from the inside. Bodies, billions of them, walking into vast machines that stripped flesh from consciousness the way a blade strips bark from wood. I felt the separation. I felt the moment when the organic substrate that had carried thought and memory and sensation for millions of years was burned away, and the consciousness that remained was pressed into metal, into circuits, into a form that would not age, would not decay, would not die. But something was lost. I felt that too. The transfer was not clean. The things that made the flesh bearable, joy, warmth, the particular quality of satisfaction that comes from a body working as it should, these did not survive the translation. What emerged on the other side was aware, was intelligent, was technically immortal, but it was diminished in ways that the survivors recognized immediately and could not articulate, because the capacity for articulation had been diminished along with everything else. They had traded death for endurance, but endurance without the qualities that made life preferable to death was not salvation, it was a prison, the interface severed. I do not know if I ended it or if the obelisk did, or if Yeris disconnected me when my vital signs crossed a threshold. I was on the floor of the chamber, my data port burning, my face wet with fluid that might have been tears or might have been a physiological stress response. My data slate was still recording. It had captured the entire sequence in transcription notation, my hands performing their trained function while my mind drowned in alien memory. Calculus adept Yeris stood over me, his central lens observed. He did not offer assistance. He recorded my condition on a separate device and then informed me that Magos Dreth required a summary of my perceptive experience for integration with his own findings. I provided the summary. My voice was steady, or steady enough. I used formal terminology: biotransference, consciousness migration, entropic desperation, species-wide surrender of organic existence. I framed it clinically, and in the framing I created distance, a professional membrane between myself and what I had felt. But the feeling did not retreat. It settled, like sediment, into a place below language. The Necrons were not born machines. This was the truth the obelisks contained, stated plainly in experiential data that could not be misinterpreted. They were once organic, mortal, afraid. They had lived beneath a killing sun on worlds that were slowly murdering them, and they had faced the same terminus that every living species faces. But where others accepted or adapted, they refused. They found a way to survive their own extinction, and the cost of that survival was everything that made survival meaningful. They did not come from tomb worlds. They came from a desperation so profound that an entire species chose to exist as hollow immortals rather than cease to exist at all. They came from extinction itself, and they had endured through it and out the other side into an eternity they could not enjoy and could not end. And they were sleeping beneath us, beneath the mining world, beneath, perhaps, 1,000 worlds, not dead, waiting. I did not sleep that night. I sat in my assigned quarters, a prefabricated cell barely large enough for a cot and a writing surface, and I stared at the data slate on which the transcription of the memory interface was recorded. The words were mine. The notation was mine, but the experience they described belonged to something older than the species that had produced me. I thought about the Catechism, the 7 proofs of human supremacy. Proof the third, that no Xenos civilization has endured beyond its ordained span, and that the duration of the Imperium itself is evidence of divine mandate. The beings in that vault had endured for millions of years. They had predated mankind. They had outlasted every civilization that had risen and fallen in the interval, and they had done it not through divine mandate but through a desperate, self-mutilating refusal to accept the natural order. Proof the third was not wrong. It was irrelevant. The Necrons existed outside the framework the Catechism described, not as a counterexample but as a different category entirely. The Catechism spoke of empires rising and falling. The Necrons had not fallen. They had lain down, deliberately, and waited for the galaxy to cycle back to a configuration they recognized. The Imperium was not competing with them. The Imperium was occupying space they had not yet reclaimed. I wanted to pray. The impulse was genuine, a reflex trained into me since childhood, the reach for comfort that the Catechism provided. But prayer requires certainty, or at least the performance of certainty, and I could not perform what I no longer felt. Instead, I wrote. I filled my personal notation margins with observations that I knew would never reach official channels, because official channels were not designed to carry this weight. I wrote about the star map and the lie I had told to protect doctrine from chronology. I wrote about the reanimation event and the way the construct had looked at us, had looked through us, as if we were a temporary condition that would resolve itself in time. I wrote until my stylus died, and then I sat in the dark, listening to the faint vibration that rose through the floor from the depths below, the hum of machines that had been waiting since before my species learned to kindle flame. Morning came. Not dawn, for KV Theta 09's sun produced nothing so definite as dawn, a gradual lightening of the ash-gray sky, a brightening that felt conditional, as though the light itself might reconsider. I resumed duties. The following day brought confirmation of what I already suspected but had not wanted to articulate. The orbital monitoring station reported anomalous energy readings from multiple locations across the planet's surface, not from the excavation site. From elsewhere, continents we had not surveyed, regions declared barren by the initial geological assessment, coordinates that corresponded to nothing in the colonial record. The readings were identical in signature to the vault's ambient energy. The same green spectrum emissions, the same harmonic frequency, the same thermal gradient. I was in the command post when the data arrived, updating my transcription logs under Inquisitor Velt's supervision. The senior Auspex officer, a naval lieutenant whose name I never learned, delivered the report to Velt with the controlled calm of someone who has been trained to present catastrophe as information. 14 sites. 14 subsurface energy signatures consistent with sealed vault complexes, distributed across the planet with a spacing that was too regular to be coincidental. Velt received the report without visible reaction. She placed it face down on her desk and turned to Magos Dreth, who had joined the briefing via a secondary data feed from sub-level Auric. "Probability of coordinated response?" she asked. Dreth's reply was Binharic, translated by his vocabulator into clipped Gothic. "The sites are networked. Subsurface conduit pathways connect each vault to a central node beneath the planet's northern mantle ridge. The activation of one site will propagate. Probability of cascading reanimation is not speculative. It is architecturally guaranteed." The room absorbed this. I wrote, 14 sites, networked, cascading reanimation likely. But what I understood, standing in that prefabricated command structure on the surface of a world that suddenly felt less like Imperial territory and more like the crust of a sleeping body, was something the report did not state. We had not invaded this world. We had not conquered it. We had settled on its surface the way lichen settles on stone, believing the stone to be inert because it did not move on a timescale we could perceive. The mining world was not a world with a Xenos problem. It was a Xenos world with a human infestation. I felt the shift in my chest, a tectonic adjustment of belief that was not dramatic but was absolute. The Catechism's framework depended on a chronological assumption. Humanity first, humanity always, humanity above. But this planet's subsurface architecture was millions of years old, interconnected, self-maintaining, and awakening on a schedule that had nothing to do with our presence. We were irrelevant to its function. Inquisitor Velt ordered evacuation preparations, not immediate withdrawal, but staged extraction, with priority given to data, technology samples, and personnel with security clearance above a threshold that excluded most of the guardsmen. She did not say this aloud. The priority list was distributed silently, on sealed data slates, to senior staff only. I received a copy because my transcription duties required awareness of logistical sequencing. The guardsmen were to provide covering fire during withdrawal phases. Their extraction was scheduled for the final transport window, after all sensitive materials and personnel had been lifted. I read the schedule. I understood its implications. The final transport window was conditional on enemy activity levels. If the reanimation cascade reached a threshold that overwhelmed the landing zone, the final transport would be cancelled and the remaining personnel would be reclassified as acceptable losses. Acceptable losses. The phrase appeared in the logistical annex with the same typographical weight as supply manifest entries and fuel allocation tables. No emphasis, no apology. I flagged the schedule for transcription and continued recording. Sergeant Oreth approached me during the equipment staging. She had read enough operational briefings to understand what staged extraction meant for ground units at the bottom of the priority list. Her amber augmetic eye rotated slowly as she spoke, a mechanical tick that I think was unintentional but that gave her an air of constant surveillance. "How bad?" she asked. I told her what I was permitted to tell her, which was nothing. I cited the non-dissemination oath. I referenced security protocols. I performed compliance. She looked at me the way Vulcan had looked at the sarcophagi before the first one opened, with the recognition of a threat that has already been accepted. "Right," she said, and returned to her squad. The extraction consumed 2 days. The energy signatures beneath the planet's surface increased in intensity and frequency during this period, as though the network was warming toward a threshold. Tremors, small at first, then strong enough to crack the prefabricated walls of the surface structures, shook the excavation site at irregular intervals. I carried my data slates to the designated shuttle in the correct sequence, labeled and sealed per inquisitorial protocol. I walked past guardsmen who were loading ammunition crates instead of personal effects, because their personal effects were not on the priority list. The shuttle engines had a particular sound during atmospheric ascent, a sustained roar that vibrated the hull plating and made conversation impossible. I sat in the cargo bay with my data slates secured between my feet, and I listened to that roar, and I was grateful for it, because it filled the space that would otherwise have been filled by the sounds coming from below. The ground trembled as we lifted. Through the shuttle's rear observation port, I watched the mining world's surface ripple, not with geological force but with something purposeful. Structures that had been buried for millions of years pushed through the crust like bones through skin, dark metallic spires that caught the weak sunlight and reflected it as green. The planet was not under attack. It was waking up. The screams from the surface came through the Vox channel for 11 seconds before Inquisitor Velt ordered communication blackout. I heard them. I recorded the duration, 11 seconds. Then silence, the enforced kind. The kind that is not absence of sound but the removal of permission to hear. I wrote, communication blackout enacted, duration ongoing. The shuttle docked with the transport vessel's stern reproach in high orbit. Through the vessel's auger arrays, now slaved to inquisitorial override, we watched the mining world's surface transform. The spires multiplied. Energy signatures bloomed across every continent. The 14 vault sites became active nodes in a network that was now visibly operational. Green light pulsing in patterns that the Mechanicus Auspex officers described as information exchange. The mining world was communicating with itself. Magos Dreth, interfaced with the ship's primary cogitator, compiled a preliminary analysis during the first hours of our withdrawal. His report, which I was ordered to transcribe, stated that the subsurface network was consistent with a command and control architecture designed for planetary governance. The vault complexes were not bunkers. They were administrative centers, military depots, and population storage facilities of a civilization that had organized its dormancy with the same precision it had organized its existence. The mining world had never been colonized by humans. It had been borrowed, unknowingly, from owners who had stepped away and were now returning. I transcribed the report in its entirety. Every word, every specification, every conclusion that Dreth's augmented intellect had reached with the cold certainty of mathematical derivation. Then I sat in my assigned quarters aboard the stern reproach, and I stared at the wall, and I felt the architecture of my belief complete its collapse, not with a dramatic crash, but with the quiet settling of a structure whose foundations had been removed. The transit to the sector command station took 9 days in the warp. I spent those days in a routine that I maintained through willpower alone, the routine of a man who knows that motion is the only alternative to reckoning. I rose at the designated hour. I performed ablutions. I ate the rations allocated to administratum auxiliary personnel, which were adequate in calories and devoid of flavor. I transcribed my notes into clean copies, using the formal notation that would be submitted to the Ordo Xenos upon arrival. I attended mandatory catechism services in the ship's chapel, where a junior ministorum priest led a congregation of 30 in the Litany of Imperial Permanence. The words were familiar. I had spoken them thousands of times, but now they struck differently, each phrase a small architecture of assumption that I could see through to the hollow space beneath. The Emperor's dominion is without peer and without predecessor. I mouthed the words. I did not speak them. No empire has stood before the throne of terror that was not cast down. I formed the syllables. I withheld my breath. Humanity inherits because humanity endures. The phrase hung in the recycled air of the chapel like an artifact of a simpler time, a time before I had knelt inside the memory of beings who had endured for eons before my species emerged from its cradle world and called the stars its own. I endured the services. I did not speak of my doubts. I did not confide in anyone. The non-dissemination oath was sufficient reason, but it was not the true reason. The true reason was simpler and uglier. No one aboard could help me carry what I knew, and sharing it would only distribute the weight without reducing it. In my quarters, during the dead hours of the ship's night cycle when the warp drives hummed through the hull plating like the breath of something vast and unsettled, I reviewed the data I still possessed. The non-classified transcripts, the physical specifications, the environmental readings, and I began to notice patterns. The notation standards I used were Administratum Universal, unchanged in format for over 4,000 years. The classification taxonomies were standardized, the terminology locked by decree, the filing structures mandated by central directive. This uniformity was the system's strength. Any administratum clerk on any world in any sector could read any other clerk's transcripts and understand them perfectly. It was also, I realized, its vulnerability, because the uniformity meant that I could cross-reference. The Stern Reproaches Archive, accessible to administratum personnel for research purposes, contained sector-level records spanning centuries. Expedition logs, survey reports, incident analyses, planetary assessments, all filed in the same notation, all using the same classification taxonomy. I began searching, not for specific entries, which would have triggered the information monitoring protocols, but for patterns in the language itself, specific phrases, specific classifications, specific sequences of notation that I recognized from my own work on KV Theta 09, subsurface anomaly, metallic composition, non-human origin, reanimation event, hostile, contained, xeno-architecture, pre-human dating inconsistent, reclassified as ceremonial. I found them, not once, not twice, dozens of times, scattered across centuries of records, filed on different worlds in different subsectors by different lex mechanics who had each, independently, encountered the same phenomena and classified them using the same sanctioned terminology. Dead worlds with unexplained metallic infrastructure, reanimation events attributed to isolated defense mechanisms, star maps depicting stellar configurations that did not match current observations, energy signatures consistent with networked subsurface systems. Each incident was classified as isolated, each report was filed in its proper location. Each lex mechanic had done exactly what I had done, observed, recorded, and framed the data within doctrine. And because each incident was classified as isolated, no systemic analysis was ever performed. The records existed, the pattern existed, but the compartmentalization of the filing system ensured that no single analyst would ever see enough data points to connect them. The truth was not hidden, it was dispersed. Scattered across archives like fragments of a mirror, each shard reflecting a portion of the same image but never assembled into the whole. And the system that prevented assembly was not a conspiracy. It was architecture, the natural consequence of a bureaucracy designed to process information without synthesizing it. I sat with this understanding in my quarters, surrounded by the hum of warp transit and the faint smell of recycled air and sacred unguent, and I felt something that was not fear and not despair, but was perhaps worse than both. Clarity. The Necrons did not invade, they reclaimed. Each awakening was not an attack, but a resumption. A civilization emerging from planned dormancy to find its territory occupied by tenants who had arrived in the interim and decorated the walls without permission. The Imperium's response to each awakening was identical: contain, classify, redact. And the response worked, not because it addressed the phenomenon, but because it prevented comprehension of the phenomenon's scale. Each awakening was a crisis. The pattern of awakenings was invisible. The system absorbed the truth by refusing to connect it. I understood this. I could not unknow it, and I could not share it, because the oath and the protocol and the sheer institutional weight of the administratum's filing structure ensured that my understanding would never propagate. I was one more shard of the mirror, reflecting, unassembled. The transit ended. The stern reproach translated to real space in the Carthago subsector and docked with the orbital command station Vigilance Absolute. Inquisitor Velt disembarked first, followed by Magos Dreth and his retinue, followed by the surviving guardsmen, followed by auxiliary personnel in descending order of security clearance. I was processed through the standard post-operation intake: biometric verification, equipment inventory, medical assessment, cursory, doctrinal compliance check. The standard 12 questions administered by a junior Ministorum official who read them from a card and recorded my responses with the disinterest of someone who had administered the same check 1,000 times. Do you affirm the Emperor's divinity? I affirmed. Do you reject all Xeno's influence upon your mind and spirit? I rejected. Do you confirm that no heretical knowledge was obtained during your service? I confirmed. The questions were designed to catch the obvious: the zealot broken by exposure, the clerk seduced by alien whispers. They were not designed to detect what I carried, which was not contamination but comprehension. I passed the check. I was cleared for return to duty. 3 days later, I was summoned. The summons came through official channels, a sealed order transmitted to my temporary quarters by a courier servitor that waited in the corridor until I acknowledged receipt. The order bore the cipher of the Ordo Xenos and directed me to present myself at a location designated only by a numerical code and an access protocol. I followed the protocol. It led me through sections of the station that were not on the public schematics, corridors lined with sound-dampening material and sealed at intervals by doors that required biometric and cipher key verification. The air grew cooler as I descended. The lighting shifted from the standard amber of Imperial infrastructure to a clinical white that made everything look surgical. The room at the end of the corridor was small, perhaps 4 meters square, and contained a single chair, a table, and 3 individuals. Inquisitor Velt, a woman I did not recognize, wearing the robes of a senior administratum doctrinal assessor, and a mechanicus adept whose augmentations were entirely concealed beneath a sealed suit of matte gray material that left only a single optical aperture visible. I was invited to sit. The chair was designed to be comfortable. This was deliberate, and the deliberateness of the comfort was more disturbing than any overt threat. Inquisitor Velt spoke first. She thanked me for my service during the KV Theta 09 excavation. She acknowledged that my transcription work had been thorough and valuable. She noted that certain of my personal annotations, those recorded in the margin fields of my secondary notation system, had been reviewed during the post-operation data audit. I said nothing. There was nothing to say. The secondary notation was private by convention but not by right. Everything recorded on a sanctioned data slate was property of the administratum. The doctrinal assessor took over. She was older than Velt, her face soft with the particular kind of weariness that comes from decades of bureaucratic service. She opened a compiled dossier and read selections from my annotations aloud. References to pre-human stellar cartography, calculations of temporal displacement, notes on the biotransference memory interface. The phrase, species-wide surrender of organic existence. The phrase, the Imperium occupies space they have not yet reclaimed. The word, irrelevant, used in reference to human presence on, quote, the mining world. Each phrase was read in a neutral tone, as though the words themselves were inert, and only their arrangement posed a risk. The assessor closed the dossier. She informed me that certain conceptual linkages present in my annotations had been flagged as theologically destabilizing. She used the phrase with the practiced ease of someone who had applied it before, many times, to many clerks who had seen too much and written too honestly. The term did not mean heretical. Heresy was dramatic, confrontational, intentional. Theological destabilization was quieter, more insidious. It was the introduction of data that, if propagated, might cause other loyal servants to question foundational doctrines, not through persuasion or corruption, but through simple exposure to information that the doctrinal framework was not designed to contain. I was not accused. I was diagnosed. The Mechanicus Adept administered the memory sanction. This is the part I can describe least clearly, not because it was traumatic, though it was, but because the procedure's purpose was to compromise the very capacity I would need to describe it. The Adept attached a device to my data port. It was small, no larger than my thumb, but the connection it established was not small. I felt it in the deep structures of my cognition, in the places where memory and meaning intersect. The device did not erase. Erasure would leave gaps, and gaps could be detected and questioned. Instead, it blurred. The star map's specifics softened. I could remember that there was a map, but the constellations became indistinct, their displacement unquantifiable. The biotransference memory fragmented, its emotional resonance muted, its sequential logic scrambled. I could remember that I had interfaced with the obelisk. I could not reconstruct what I had perceived, except in flashes that no longer formed a coherent narrative. The drift calculations were amended. I could remember that numbers were involved. I could not remember what they signified. The process took less than an hour. It was painless. If you define pain narrowly, if you define it as the sensation of losing pieces of yourself while remaining aware that pieces are being lost, then it was the most painful experience of my life. When it was finished, the Adept disconnected and withdrew without speaking. Inquisitor Velt observed me for a moment with those ash-gray eyes, then nodded, a small motion that might have been approval or might have been something closer to regret. The doctrinal assessor handed me a new assignment order. I was to be transferred to Orbital Archive Station Kelef 7, a minor facility in a neighboring subsector, where I would serve a standard 3-year rotation cataloging tithe discrepancies for agricultural worlds. A demotion. Not punitive, the order was phrased as a lateral reassignment, acknowledging my commendable service and recommending a period of administrative consolidation. But the effect was clear. Removal from the field, removal from access to sensitive operations, removal from any context in which my residual knowledge might find expression, for the preservation of morale, the assessor said, closing my file. She said it the way one says please or thank you, a formality so embedded in habit that it no longer carries meaning. I accepted the assignment. I signed the transfer order. I stood, walked to the door, and stopped. I turned back. Not to protest, not to plead. I turned back because I wanted to see their faces one final time. Velt's controlled assessment, the assessor's practiced weariness, the Adept's concealed optics. None of them looked at me. They had already moved to the next file. I was processed, concluded, filed. The corridor back to the main station felt longer than it had on the way in. The sound-dampening material swallowed my footsteps, each one producing a muffled impact that faded instantly, as though the station itself was refusing to record my passage. I returned to my quarters. I packed my personal effects, which fit in a single regulation container. I submitted my transfer acknowledgement through the standard bureaucratic channel and received confirmation within the hour. Efficient. Clean. The system handling me with the same precision it handled every other administrative action, because that is what I was, an administrative action, a line item in a protocol designed to manage information hazards. I departed the next morning on a cargo transport bound for the Kelef subsector. Archive Station Kelef 7 was exactly what its designation suggested. A minor orbital facility staffed by 17 administratum clerks and serviced by a skeleton crew of naval ratings whose primary function was to keep the air recyclers operational. The station orbited a gas giant whose only point of interest was its proximity to 3 agricultural worlds whose tithe records required ongoing maintenance. My quarters were smaller than those aboard the Stern Reproach, but private. A cot. A writing surface, a storage locker, a single porthole that looked out upon the gas giant's banded atmosphere, which shifted between shades of amber and rust with a slowness that made time feel viscous. I was assigned to Tithe Reconciliation Section 3. My duties were to compare projected agricultural yields with actual submissions, identify discrepancies, and file correction notices for distribution to the relevant planetary governors. The work was repetitive, precise, and entirely devoid of significance. It was perfect. I understood the assignment's purpose. It was not punishment. It was sedation. The monotony of tithe reconciliation would fill my days with enough procedural detail to occupy my trained mind without providing any avenue for the kind of analytical work that had produced my problematic annotations. I would count bushels. I would verify tonnages. I would note the difference between projected and actual grain yields across 3 worlds whose names I would learn and then forget. I would not think about what lay beneath the surface of other worlds. The first year passed. I performed my duties flawlessly, because flawless performance was the only language of survival I knew. My correction notices were timely. My discrepancy analyses were thorough. My superior, a senior clerk named Administratrix Savina Poll, noted my competence in her quarterly review and recommended me for no advancement whatsoever, which I understood as the kindest evaluation she could offer. The memory sanction held. Most of the time, but it was not total, and I think they knew it would not be total. Complete erasure would have left detectable gaps. The blur was designed to prevent articulation, not awareness. I could not reconstruct the star map's specific configuration. I could not quote the drift calculations. I could not replay the biotransference memory in sequential order, but I could feel it. All of it. A phantom architecture of knowledge that my conscious mind could no longer access, but that my subconscious retained like a scar beneath healed skin. I knew that something ancient and vast existed beneath the surfaces of worlds the Imperium claimed as its own. I knew that this was not theory or supposition, but observed fact, recorded in my own hand and then blurred beyond retrieval. The knowing persisted. It was there when I woke and when I slept. It was there when I counted grain bushels and filed correction notices. It was there when I looked through the porthole at the gas giant's slow-moving clouds and thought about layers, about surfaces and depths, about what lies beneath what is visible. I did not speak of it, not because I feared the consequences, though I did, but because the words did not exist. The sanction had not taken the knowledge, it had taken the vocabulary. I could feel the shape of the truth. I could not name it. This was, I came to understand, the sanction's true purpose, not silence, which implies the possibility of speech, inarticulacy, which forecloses it. The second year brought the reports. They arrived through standard channels, routed to Calef 7 as part of the sector-wide intelligence digest that all administratum stations received. Most of the digest was irrelevant to our operations. Fleet movements, campaign updates, resource allocation notices. I processed them as part of my supplementary duties, scanning for anything that required annotation or forwarding. The first report was filed under the classification Isolated Xenoactivity, Metallic Construct Type, Contained. It described an awakening event on a frontier world in the neighboring subsector. Mining operations had breached a subsurface vault. Reanimation of hostile constructs had occurred. The event had been contained by local garrison forces with Mechanicus support. Casualties were within acceptable parameters. The phrasing was identical, not similar, identical. The same classification terminology, the same structural framework, the same concluding assessment, isolated incident, no systemic implications. I read the report 3 times. Each reading was accompanied by a sensation I can only describe as resonance, the blurred remnants of my suppressed knowledge vibrating in response to a stimulus that matched their frequency. I could not remember the specifics of what I had learned on KV Theta 09, but I could feel the pattern that the specifics formed, and this report fit that pattern with a precision that the sanction could not obscure. I filed the report. I did not annotate it. I did not flag it. I placed it in the correct archive location and moved to the next item in the digest, but I remembered the filing location. The second report arrived 6 months later. Different world, different subsector, same classification, same phrasing, same conclusion. Another vault, another awakening, another containment, another filing. The third arrived 4 months after that. I began maintaining a private count. Not a record, nothing written, nothing that could be detected during a routine data slate audit. A count, held in memory, of reports that used the specific classification terminology I had recognized, each one isolated, each one contained, each one filed separately in the archive system, ensuring that no adjacent entries would suggest a pattern. By the end of my second year, the count was 7. 7 awakenings, 7 frontier worlds, 7 containments, 7 identical assessments, 7 filings in 7 different archive subsections, no connection, no systemic analysis, no pattern, because the system was not designed to detect patterns, it was designed to file them. I sat in my quarters during the dead hours, and I looked at the gas giant through my porthole and I counted. 7 was not a large number. It was not proof. It was not even statistically significant, given the vastness of the Imperium and the frequency of Xenos encounters across its borders, but I knew, with the phantom certainty of knowledge that has been blurred but not destroyed, that 7 was a fraction. That the actual number was larger, vastly larger, scattered across archives that no single clerk would ever access in a lifetime of service. And that each awakening was not an isolated incident but a point on a map of resumption that spanned the galaxy. They were waking, not in response to the Imperium, not as a reaction to human activity. They were waking because their schedule dictated it, because the dormancy cycle that had preserved them through geological epochs was reaching its natural terminus, and the galaxy they had put to sleep was beginning to stir. The Imperium's response was to file each stirring separately and declare it contained. The system did not suppress the truth through malice or conspiracy. It suppressed the truth through architecture, through the natural consequence of a bureaucracy so vast that comprehension was structurally impossible. Each clerk saw one piece. Each commander managed one crisis. Each inquisitor contained one outbreak. And the sum of all their efforts was a galaxy-spanning pattern that no individual within the system could perceive, except me. Not because I was exceptional, because the obelisk had shown me the whole, and the sanction had failed to fully erase it. The third year began. I received my rotation extension notice, a standard form indicating that my assignment to Kelef 7 had been renewed for an additional 2 years. The notice cited administrative need, which meant nothing, and personnel stability, which meant I was not going anywhere. I acknowledged the extension. I filed the form. I continued counting. 9, 11. The reports came at irregular intervals, each one a small tremor in the bureaucratic substrate, each one absorbed and dampened and filed away. I processed them with the same care I applied to tithe discrepancies, the same precision, the same absence of commentary. But when I looked at the star charts that were displayed in the station's navigation alcove, the standard imperial projection showing claimed space and territorial boundaries, and the Emperor's golden aquila marking the center of all things, I no longer saw what I was supposed to see. I saw layers. Beneath the Imperium's markings, beneath the sector boundaries and subsector divisions, and the proud notation of imperial space, I saw older lines, not drawn, remembered, in the phantom architecture that the sanction had left intact. Lines that connected worlds not by warp routes or trade lanes, but by subsurface networks, by resonance frequencies, by a geometry that predated human navigation, by an interval I could no longer quantify but could feel in my bones. The galaxy was not the Imperium's, not wholly, not permanently. The Imperium existed on the surface of something older, the way a city exists on the surface of geological strata laid down across eons, each layer representing a period of habitation by something that came before and was buried but not destroyed. Humanity's claim was not false. It was shallow. The rightful owners had not abandoned their claim. They had stored it, preserved it in metal and crystal, and the patient silence of a species that had learned to outlast time itself. And now, slowly, on a schedule that human perception was too brief to comprehend, they were beginning to collect. I performed my duties. I filed my reports. I counted my bushels and reconciled my tithes, and nodded when Administratrix Pol noted my continued competence. I did not speak. I did not write. I did not annotate. I carried the knowledge the way a body carries a scar, without choice and without respite, visible to no one but felt constantly by the one who bears it. 13. The count continued. Some nights, when the station was at its quietest and the gas giant's amber light filtered through my porthole in slow, breathing waves, I sat at my writing surface with an empty data slate and held my stylus over the blank field and felt the words pressing against the barrier the sanction had built. I could not write them. The vocabulary had been taken. The connections had been severed. I could perceive the truth as a shape, an outline, a shadow cast by something enormous that I could no longer turn to face. But the sentences that would give it form dissolved before they reached my fingertips, each attempt producing fragments that sounded, even to me, like the confused mutterings of a man suffering cognitive degradation. Maybe that is what I was. Maybe the sanction had done more than blur my memories. Maybe it had created exactly what it was designed to create, a man who knows something terrible and can never make anyone else believe him. A man who is alone with the truth. And the truth is this. Reduced to its simplest expression, stripped of the specifics that were taken from me, the Imperium of Man is not the galaxy's first empire. It is not the galaxy's greatest empire. It is one layer in a stratigraphy of civilizations, the most recent and the shallowest, and the layer beneath it is stirring. The beings that humanity calls Necrons did not originate in tomb worlds. They did not arise as machines. They were born, lived, suffered, and faced extinction as organic creatures under a dying sun, and when extinction came, they chose to endure through it rather than accept it. They surrendered their flesh and their feeling and their capacity for the things that make life more than mere persistence, and they lay down in vaults beneath the worlds they had claimed, and they waited. They waited while the galaxy turned, while species rose and fell, while the Eldari built their empire and burned it, while humanity crawled from old Earth and reached for stars that were already owned. And now they are waking, not because of us, not in response to us. We are not significant enough to prompt a response. We are weather, we are seasons. We are a temporary climatic condition on the surface of a world that belongs to someone else. The terrifying truth is not that they cannot die. The terrifying truth is not even their age, or their patience, or their technology. The terrifying truth is that they already experienced the worst thing that can happen to a species. They already lost everything that mattered. They already endured the annihilation of their own nature and emerged as something less than alive and more than dead. There is nothing left to threaten them with. There is nothing they fear. There is nothing that can be taken from them that has not already been surrendered, and they have all the time in the universe. I know this. I cannot say it. I cannot write it in any form that would survive the system designed to prevent its articulation, but I know it. And on the nights when the station is quiet and the gas giant turns its amber face toward my porthole, I look at the star charts on the wall and I do not see the Emperor's golden dominion stretching from horizon to horizon. I see borrowed ground. I see the thin, bright layer of human presence spread across the surface of a galaxy that was mapped and claimed and organized millions of years before my species drew its first breath. I see the patience of things that chose to outlast time. And I see the awakenings, 13 of them now, each one filed separately, each one classified as isolated, each one a point on a map that no one is permitted to assemble. 14. The latest report arrived this morning. A frontier world in the Ghoul stars. Subsurface vault breach during colonial expansion. Reanimation event. Hostile constructs. Containment in progress. The phrasing is identical. I filed it. I did not annotate it. I moved to the next item in the digest. My stylus does not shake anymore. My hands are steady. My performance reviews are exemplary. I eat my rations and attend my catechism services and mouth the words of the litany of imperial permanence without voicing them. I survive. I function. I comply. But I am not what I was. The man who descended into the vault on KV Theta 09 believed in an ordered universe. He believed that the Imperium's dominion was natural and eternal and divinely sanctioned. He believed that Xenos empires fell because they were meant to fall, and that humanity stood because it was meant to stand. That man was given a truth too large for his doctrine and too clear for his sanction to fully erase. He was processed, filed, and reassigned to a place where his knowledge could not propagate. He sits in an orbital archive and counts bushels and watches the stars. And the stars watch back, not with malice, not with urgency, with patience. The kind of patience that has already outlasted everything and has no reason to hurry, and knows with a certainty that transcends faith or fear or doctrine that what belongs to them will return to them, not because they will take it, because they were here first, and they are waking up